Jacques C. Ellul as well came out with the same thing in one of his books. And he says since the 1950s, everybody in the US, Canada, Britain, and across Europe has had a cardiac system. That's how they used to do it, cardiac systems, before they used the big computers, eventually blossomed into computers, where the same thing was happening. The police had people everywhere who fed the data to them on different customers in restaurants, cafes, people you'd pop in to see in the morning, grab a cup of coffee, off you go. That kind of stuff. You have no idea how we've been spied on. And we think it's only since 9/11 happened in 2001 that all of this started. Utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. Power doesn't run by any kind of free democratic principle. It does not keep power that way. Power is pretty well tyrannical. And to be honest with you, there's never been a system created where the public had the inputs to find out what was going on, or the access to it. Never been a system. Because you've always had these powerful institutions and money boys running the show. Let's be honest, if the Bank of America CEO or something, or the Bank of Canada CEO wants to talk to a prime minister, and you happen to somehow, under some miracle, and God knows how many letters you've written, and agreements you've made, and checkups you've had to make sure you're fit to get in, actually sat in a waiting room, who do you think they're going to take first? And you know that you wouldn't even get in there to see them. So much for democracy. The Club of Rome said, and Margaret Thatcher said the same thing when she left politics. She said, I now belong to a parallel government. She says the parallel government can get all the work done, get the plans done, not just debated, but actually put into action because they're not responsible to the public. The Club of Rome said the same thing. They said democracy had too many competing parties, all fighting, vying for power, that they could never get anything done with the big agenda. They already had an agenda. How do you get it done? Which tells you it was above democracy of any kind. But they couldn't get it done. Now, I think I hear music coming in. It's very, very faint. If there is, it might be the break, so we're back after this break.
The American dream has become a nightmare. Signs of the time are on cardboard on corners in town. Like a cancer that's silently spreading, there's an unspoken fear. We're on our way down. We must take America back. Main Street to Wall Street, cities and states, Washington, D.C.
Hi, folks. I am Alan Watsons. This is Cutting Through the Matrix, standing in for John Stadmiller, who will, I think, will probably be back tomorrow. Going over the big changes, really, rather than going to specific stories that are happening today, because there's so many of them, which simply confirm what I'm talking about right here, that nothing happens by chance. Nothing happens by chance. Even the presidents, as far as I'm concerned, and people think this is extreme, but I really do believe that they know years in advance which the formula is, who's getting in when, and when it's going to be their turn to be put in. I really believe that's rigged. I really do. I really, really do believe it's that rigged. And since there's only one agenda, and every single president, regardless of the party he belongs to, is all on board with the United Nations and their agenda, then there is only one agenda, obviously, regardless of the president. It's interesting that Jefferson himself said that when you see basically an agenda going through continuing through between changes of houses, meaning changes of Congress, parties. It says, then you'll know you're under tyranny. And to be honest with you, as far back as I can remember about the US, that's what I've seen. In fact, everybody who signed on to the United Nations, and even the League of Nations as far back as that, really was under a new system without telling the public. When the League of Nations was set up, and it was set up, by the way, by those who formed the Council on Foreign Relations, and the predecessors, it was actually the Lord Milner Group and the Cecil Rhodes Society run by Rothschild in Britain. There was a co-founder of Cecil Rhodes for world government, by the way, that's what it was, and also to take over the resources of all the world. That was also part of their stipulated agenda. And they blossomed into the Royal Institute for International Affairs, but they couldn't call it the branch of the US, the Royals, so they called it the Council on Foreign Relations. They had another name before they called it the Council on Foreign Relations, but it's the same thing. Always working towards a global government. And Professor Carl Quigley was the official historian for them for a while. He had access to all their records. He was updating them. He was all for the world agenda. And he said the same thing. He says, there is a parallel government that is not responsible to the public. In other words, they can work towards whatever they desire unimpeded. There's no inquiry into what they're up to. There's no public inputs or demands made on them whatsoever. They simply make the agenda, go along with it, work it into being. And he said the technocrats. Now, what's a technocrat? A technocrat really is a worker who runs across the globe to make these things happen, with big finances backing him. Like Maurice Strong is one of them. Zbigniew Brzezinski, of course, everyone knows of, and the same with Kissinger. But there's many, many more. They are given their mandates, they go out to the world with unlimited financing, and they make it happen. All to bring in this new society. Now, all being Darwinists, all using the big think tanks and futurist societies, or the trend reports that they're always getting in on what they see with all these trends that are happening. How will the future be? They came to the conclusion an awful long time ago, believing, as I say, in the Darwin type of belief of evolution, that only an elite should survive in an unsustainable world. Back after these messages.
Get ready for Real Talk Radio. You're listening to the National Intel Report with your host, John Stadtmiller.
Hi, folks. I'm Alan Watts, standing in for John Stadtmiller, who I think is back tomorrow, talking about the real world, the world that the media doesn't go on about very much at all, tends to ignore, in fact, because the media's job is to keep you in a different reality. Media is an essential arm of government. In fact, they couldn't have got to where they've got today without the aid of the media, the complicity of the media, keeping the big picture out of their papers so that you will think that things are just happening by chance, and terrorism happens by chance, and all of this kind of stuff. I mentioned before about how they said that the lone person, the loner, is a danger because, you see, the loner is unpredictable. Groups are very predictable, very predictable. But the loner, who knows what he's thinking? Who knows what he's even studying, perhaps? Who knows if he's got the ability to go out to the public and say the king has no clothes in such a way that the spell is broken? That's what they're terrified of. They're not afraid of guns or revolutions. If you've noticed, across the Western world, since the 80s especially, they've built up internal armies of police specialized units that are military units with all the latest combat gear and weaponry to deal with the fallout down the road in case it happens. It might happen, it might not, but just in case. And they've got, of course, unlimited funding to do so. Why? Because the taxpayer pays for everything. We pay so that the elite themselves can go on into a glorious future as they bring down the populations of the old type that are no longer necessary. They're just using up resources that will be needed by those who are going to go on for the next million years. The better types, the Darwinian types, those fittest to survive, who've proven it by gaining wealth and power and holding on to it through generations. That is one of the definitions of it, in fact. Whereas the rest of you see, well, you're just the useless eaters, as Lord Bertrand Russell says.